Um, Hi, I'm Susan from the media team. You've seen me before. You'll see me again. I'm here with Hannah, Michael, and Mark. And everybody want to go around and say who you are. And I live in the Midwest near the Great Lakes. It's for context of my bioregion. Hannah?
Well, I'm Hannah, and you've seen me before too, I think, perhaps, maybe. I'm also on the Atheopagan media team. I live in Southern Arizona in Tucson.
And I'm Mark, and you've never seen me before.
Who's Mark?
I live in the watershed of the Russian River along the California coast, north of San Francisco.
Mm-hmm. And I'm Michael, or Mihal, depending on how I'm feeling that day. And I live in Iowa, right in the middle of corn country, especially at this time of year.
Well, I did read something today. Let's see if I can paraphrase it that I thought was interesting, which is the only pain that's unavoidable is the pain of trying to avoid unavoidable pain.
Yeah,
That's a very Buddhist way of looking at things, I think.
Yeah, and being in the middle of the hottest time of the year really resonates because we have to lean into the heat and just accept it for what it is here. So
Yeah.
That's my connection to the holiday.
Uh-huh. Well, to start with, I guess we can talk about, what do you call this? People have a lot of different things that they call this holiday. I really wrestled with several different names before settling on dimming, which was suggested in the Atheopagan Facebook group. I like that because it's universal. As long as you're in the northern hemisphere, the light is dimming wherever you are. So it's something that's usable wherever you go. How about you folks? What do you call it?
I have not really settled in the name for the day itself, but it's kind of the start of the season that I'm calling cicada time. And because it's the sound really that resonates for me with knowing what time of year it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I associate the cicada noises with that, like hot, and everything has just kind of a little bit of a yellow golden glow to it. And the plants, maybe not quite yet, but soon they're going to start getting a little toasty looking. They're not quite dry and dead and fall looking, but it's definitely that end of summer blah kind of, and which I really like. And I'm thinking that maybe it's sort of it's like that precursor to fall where it's like, oh, we're almost there. And I really love fall, and partly just because I'm like, oh good, summer's over, all the work is done. I don't have to do any of what I did what I could this year for the garden, and now I'm off the hook. But it's kind of like it, and I always loved the start of school, so it's kind of a precursor to that too. It's like something's coming, something's changing, and the cicada noise really, I associate that with that anticipation. Something stirring.
Well, for me, so I do like the term dimming, and I think that I'm probably going to try to use that in contexts like this where I'm, talking to people in different regions. But a more regionally specific way of thinking about it that I really enjoy, I like to call this time of year high monsoon, because I live in Arizona, and we have a monsoon period that starts roughly at the beginning of July. And this is sort of the middle of it. And of course, it varies from year to year, the exact timing. It was a little on the late side this year, but we've had some pretty good storms. And so this feels like the middle of the monsoon season. It's definitely not the end of summer. It's kind of the beginning of the wet summer, summer number 2 for us. And it's also more or less the hottest time of the year. So high monsoon I love, because that's really what everybody's looking forward to at this time of year. We're all between the rains, we're just waiting for more rain. And with the rains, of course, it does get cooler, but we also get upheaval and some destruction. It's a time of chaos and celebration. We just had in the last couple of days, we had this huge rainstorm that actually was dropping large bits of hail on Tucson Midtown, and the power went out in a lot of the city. And there are some folks who haven't had their power turned back on yet. And so it's definitely like, it's not boring. It is both a time of celebration and some relief from the monotony of the dry heat, but also, yeah, a time when you do have to be careful about your environment and make sure that you are treating the monsoons with the respect that they deserve.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And for me, coming from the Irish perspective, I would call it Lughnasadh, and that's Lughnasadh rather than Lughnasadh. It's just the middle syllable is like a schwa, so na, Lughnasadh. And that's compound word, Lu meaning the god Lu, and Nasa is assembly, so the assembly of Lu. And they would have probably had almost like the Olympic Games, the Tailteann Games, which are named after Lu's mother, I believe. So they would have had those in ancient Ireland, and there was an attempt after independence to bring them back. So throughout the 1920s, they actually had like an Irish Olympics called the Tailteann Games, but it didn't. They just didn't have the funding due to the Great Depression, and it ended up being cancelled and never brought back again. But there's always talk about maybe they'll do it again eventually. I don't know if that's going to happen, and maybe that's not something we want to happen, because I'm not a big fan of the Olympic organization. I love the games, but I just don't like all the things that are surround it. But this is a very highly regionalized festival as well in Ireland, and has tons of names. One synonym for Lughnasadh is Brón Trogan, which means the sorrows of the earth, which is kind of the idea that you're harvesting and you're like cutting open the earth to take the fruit. So it's kind of a bit of a bittersweet kind of association with nature. Other names are, so it's usually celebrated on the last Sunday of July. So it's always a Sunday. So I got my book here again. So it's Irish Folk Customs and Beliefs by Sean O'Sullivan. So he lists quite a few here. Downach Crumdove, which is Crumdove's Sunday. Dunny Sunday, Bilberry Sunday, because people would have gone up into the hills to get the wild bilberries to eat. The first fruit, the first harvest of the season was usually those berries. Also called Frown Sunday. Frown is an Irish word for a bilberry. Could also have been called Garland Sunday or Garlic Sunday. Mountain or Rock Sunday. And then Downach Navar, which means Men's Sunday. And it could also be called the Sunday of the New Potatoes. So I guess you would have had the first potatoes of the year at that time. So there, it's quite very highly regional. But it doesn't really have much resonance for me. I think it's definitely something that if you're in the countryside and you're going up into the mountains, and you have that easy accessibility to berries and things like that, maybe it would mean more. Right now, I'm living in Iowa right now, so I guess I'm kind of associating this time of year with sweet corn. So 2 weeks ago, we started getting the sweet corn harvest, and so trying to eat as much of that as we can in this short period when you can. And it is amazing how quickly the sweetness leaves the corn as well if you don't get them just on that first day when they're picked.
That would mean that then locally where you are, you might associate corn dollies made with corn shucks with.
Yes, we have made those in the past.
So that kind of brings me around to, how do you celebrate this? I mean, there are a lot of traditional associations, like with the grain harvest and bread making and beer making and all that good kind of stuff. Berry picking is another one. Here, the blackberries are ripe right here at the beginning of August. But in the way of rituals, what are the kinds of things that you like to do when celebrating this holiday?
Well, as Michael brought up corn, I've been thinking about that a lot this year as the grain component of the year, because, well, we've been harvesting corn for a while already. You know, we have a different season. It's still, it's a very, when it comes to grain, that is definitely the overarching, most regionally relevant grain that we're in the middle of harvesting. And so, yeah, I have some corn from my local CSA, community supported agriculture. And so my plan is to make some elote, you know, grilled corn on the cob with the with some of the basically Mexican style corn on the cob, which is always a treat that I look forward to in the summertime here.
Yeah, we have that here too. We don't have local corn harvesting. The corn comes from the Midwest, or from vegetable farms in the Central Valley. But it's definitely corn season. The mounds of corn at the grocery store are very large. And we also do the Mexican style roasted corn here, because we have a large Latino population.
Another thing that happens around this time of year locally is that in late July is the time when the Tohono O'odham people harvest the fruits of the saguaros. And so that, like, one of the community days has just passed for that, but this is the time of year for harvesting saguaro fruits. So they can be made into for anybody who hasn't been in the land of cactus, a lot of cactuses grow these very nice fruits, which are rather sweet, and they have these incredible flowers before that. But so you can harvest the fruits of the saguaro, and it involves having a very long pole. There's it's quite fun to participate in one of these harvests. But then one of the things that they do with it is they ferment it, and they make a kind of a sticky wine out of it. And so that is something that I'm not doing this year, but something that I do associate with this time of year and would be an excellent way of celebrating.
Sage Sievers here in Iowa, which is an organization that is all about protecting heirloom seeds and sharing them, of course, and getting them out there. And they did have a conference just I think last week, which is interesting, just talking about the seed saver movement and that kind of thing. And I was wondering if that's something, since you are kind of getting the first fruits, this probably would have been a time when you do save those seeds for planting for next year. I wonder if anybody's done anything like that before.
When I've grown things like corn, I've saved seed from it so that I could grow it again. Yeah.
Most of my seed saving happens, I would say, a little later in the summer. Closer to the equinox probably is when a lot of them will be ready. It did just harvest my garlic, so it was fun to hear you say garlic Sunday, because I'm like, oh, I just did that yesterday, so it's a garlic Saturday. But so yeah, it's about the time for that. So those are, I mean, not seeds, but you know, take the head apart and use those for next year. But yeah, a lot of our stuff will not be ready for a little while yet. As far as gardening goes, now is the time for like second planting season. So if you want to do fall broccoli or something like that, like planting in August is the time. The warmth helps it sprout faster, and then by the time it gets to be fall, it's like it's growing, but it's slowing down instead of speeding up. So then it's ready for harvest before the winter sets in. So like we're going to be doing more of that, I think. At this time, it's kind of a weird. Before I was like very into gardening, I wouldn't have thought, August was the planting time, but it really kind of it is once you get kind of more intense into it. So
Cool. Yeah, and I like to do some of the more traditional things as well. I like to I usually bake bread at this time of year. It's the only time of year that I generally bake bread. But I like to make a nice rye loaf and eat that with balsamic vinegar and good olive oil, and crushed garlic. And it's very, very tasty and delicious and addictive. And I just associate it with the season. So that's a thing that I do. The more formal rituals I don't really do so much of. Other than sort of, I have a little sheaf of wheat that I keep on my focus, and I will bless the wheat, kind of in the name of the season, just to sort of remind myself that this is when it's happening. But it's mostly about eating and drinking stuff that is being harvested now.
yeah, I think so. The summer solstice, I don't really do a lot because we have, I think I talked about in that video, we have like a big cookout, and that's kind of the height of our social season. And then the next few things, other than Hallows, for us is more about like communal eating, and it's more feasting than it is like a ritual. Hallows is, I will do more just me stuff, but the next few things probably until that February holiday is really just going to be getting together with people in a smaller way than the summer solstice cookout that we have, and it's more focused on the community for me than it is for ritual stuff.
I have a wreath that I made a while back, and I'll show it to you. So this is my monsoon wreath. Yeah, so I'm gonna hang that on my front door. That's
really cool.
yeah. So this is some scraps of stuff from my art studio, and I just felt like it captured the sense of that explosive power that comes from those storms. And yeah, it's just, this is a time of year when it really does, we need a celebration. And the biggest community event that, one of the memories that I have going back from living in Tucson is people coming together as a community individually by watching storms from their respective porches and just all reacting to them as a community. And so it feels like a good time for a symbol hung on the outside of my house for that reason,
Nice.
This would have been a time of marts and festivals, and like horse racing was very big at this time of year as well. Traditionally, they would have had big horse races. But yeah, I think one of the most famous festivals from this time of year in Ireland is the Puck Fest, when they crown a goat King Puck for the festival, and it happens in Killorgan in County Kerry. And so they go out into the hills and they capture a wild goat and bring him, and they put him in this. It's kind of cruel, I guess. They put him in a cage on a pole above the town for 3 days, and so you'll have to look into what animal best practices are being employed. But then there's a girl is also chosen to be Queen Puck as well. So
Does she have to live in the cage with the goat?
I do not believe so, but I've never attended. So, but yeah, it's kind of an interesting festival. And for me, like this, we're coming up to the Iowa State Fair soon, so that's kind of, for me, that's an alternative that I can take part in. I really like the Iowa State Fair. So it's also a time of mountain climbing. A lot of people would have gone on pilgrimage to holy places high in the mountains. So like Croagh Patrick in County Mayo is a famous place for pilgrimage. It's a mountain, and there's a Catholic shrine at the top that people go on pilgrimage to, but all the evidence suggests that there has been a pilgrimage up there since pre-Christian times as well. So there's this that kind of continuity. Often people will walk it barefoot as well, so they really commit to it. And then it's also time to go to holy wells. It's time of water as well, because as part of the horse racing and as part of the cattle marts and things like that, people would have let their livestock go through water to cleanse them. So that's what a reason maybe people went to holy wells as well. Problem with the holy wells nowadays is when people go there, often they're not leaving biodegradable offerings anymore.
Michael freeze.
I'm back, I think.
Yeah.
So they're leaving things that aren't biodegradable. So that's become a bit of a problem around a lot of holy wells. So just a bit, I think there's a campaign just to make sure people are aware of of what they're leaving behind.
That's good. Yeah, when I went to the Bridget's Well in Clare, people had left prosthetic limbs and crutches, and tons of pictures of people that needed healing or had been lost. And I don't think much of any of it was biodegradable.
Yeah.
It's a shame, because I love the idea of leaving pictures somewhere.
Yeah.
And it seems like that's something that we being, collectively humanity, right, could come up with a better way of having biodegradable images that are intended for that sort of purpose.
If you print it on paper, I think that would probably be about the best you could get away with.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That's something to keep in mind.
Yeah.
It's also another thing that kind of I try to keep in mind at this time of year as well, is that there's a lot of ghost storytelling related to Christmas in that time of year. And then Halloween is also a spooky time of year. But within Japanese culture, summer is the time of ghosts. And I do have this sense when you're out in the countryside on an August evening, and there's that shimmer, and it's kind of that golden feeling, you can kind of feel that spookiness, the possible where people got that idea, maybe a slight, I don't know, the heat shimmer, that kind of has a spooky feeling to me. Yeah, so I think it's a good time to tell ghost stories at night around the campfire outside.
I feel like bringing up the cicadas again, I was in the garden and thinking about just the sound makes it feel like I'm in I don't know if there's just so many movies that use that sound effect for feeling other, but my brain has started to associate that feeling of just the sound making it feel like I'm not really on Earth anymore with just that complete soundscape. I don't know.
Yeah,
no, it does. It always reminds
wall of sound.
It kind of brings me to the Ken Burns Civil War documentary, where the interludes between the scenes, there was always silhouettes at dusk. I don't know if you remember that from watching it, but and you hear the cicadas and the crickets. That's a sense of the battle is over, and it's just nature is all that's left. And I think that's kind of ghostly.
There's the talk of the soundscape. Really, it reminds me that there is actually, I have a very specific piece of music that I associate with this time of year as well. It's a song called "The Swimming Song" by Loudon Wainwright III, and in particular, I think of the McGarrigle sisters, who are Canadian, did a wonderful recording of it in, I don't even know when it was, probably the 60s. And it's a song I associate with this time of year because the lyrics are about, the summer I went swimming, the summer I might have drowned, but I held my breath and I kicked my feet and I moved my arms around. So it's both about this, the joy and lightness of summer, but there's also a little bit of a darkness in that, and in a way it's about survival. The summer I might have drowned is a feeling that I often feel at the beginning of August. You know, it's hot. Things can be heavy here. You know, we almost have like a reverse sad is fairly common in this part of the world, where people get seasonal depression, and it's not from the lack of light, but it's from the oppression of the heat. And so it just feels like a very appropriate sentiment for this time of year, that it's like we've all survived. Well, most of us have survived. Not everybody does, right? But I'm feeling that, and it's worth celebrating that this time of year I held my breath, I kicked my feet, I moved my arms around. And so I love the idea that this is sort of a very superficially kind of silly and simple idea, but it's also about like the joy of prevailing over the dangers of the season, and the dangers of not moving into the season and experiencing it and you know, swimming with it rather than letting it overwhelm you.
Oh. You know, I was thinking about this, and I noticed this morning. There's a change in the quality of the light that happens right around now, where there's a foreshadowing of autumn coming. The angle of the light has changed enough now that the color of the sky is a little different, and the way trees look is just a little bit different, and it is a little spooky, as you say, Michael. It's like, okay, well, it seems like summer, but it's getting long in the tooth. It's gonna come to a close not too long from now.
Yeah, it's like, so I came across this cicada poem during the week. It didn't come with an attribution, so I'm not sure who wrote it. So if anybody's listening, watches this, they can maybe let me know who it is. But it's just called Cicada. Sick of his own face, sick of his skin, of the dark, he crawls outside himself to sing.
I love it.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah.
But cicadas are, there's something kind of bittersweet about that sound, because you're like, oh, it's coming. It's like a swan song or something. It's like it's coming to an end. Yeah, we're moving onwards. And I mean, I do think it is kind of like a memento mori in a way, because it's incredible when you think about their life cycle, that they stay underground for like 17 years, some species, and then they just give us that amazing acoustic atmosphere, and they're gone.
Yeah. The soundscape changes here too. In earlier summer, we get this kind of wall of cricket sound, where there are a lot of crickets. And by the time you get to here, and then particularly into September, most of them have died. And so it's just like a lone cricket or two or three crickets on a warm evening. And it's, to me, that's really the sound of autumn, is that sound of just a couple of crickets that haven't made it up, but are still alive, haven't been eaten. So they're just kind of hanging out there and trying their luck.
Yeah, I like defining the seasons by the critters. It's a little, obviously, for at least for where I live, it's harder to do in the winter months because there's just nobody that's awake. But like when the fireflies come, it's right around the summer solstice. And so now we're transitioning to the cicadas, and the crickets for us are kind of similar to what you said. So I haven't like assigned them to anything, because they're kind of just ever present. And in the springtime, it's more about, okay, very early spring is the peepers, the little frogs, and that's like the very first thing. And then we transition to the wall of bird song, and it's when I get really cranky in the morning because the birds are up at 4 or whatever ridiculous time that they want to be up. And but then it's like the bug time, in the warmer months is when it's is who's making the sound.
Yeah.
And I guess that's in the wintertime. I think I've talked about this before. In the wintertime, I don't listen to music at work. I tend to listen more to just recorded woods, birds, and sounds, because there's just nothing in the soundscape outside other than, the wind blowing. And it's really, I guess I'm noticing this year more than others that I have in the past, of how much that affects me mentally, and my association with the wheel of the year is what I'm hearing versus what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
There's a movie.
Go ahead.
There's a movie called Dancing at Lughnasadh, if you'd like
Yeah.
a seasonal movie.
I've seen that.
Although, if you watch the trailer, you're kind of like, oh, this is a jolly romp, and you watch it, then you're like, that was so depressing.
Yeah, it's really depressing.
I feel like that's a thing with Irish movies.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. This one, so it's a play by Brian Friel, first of all, but then made into a movie in 1998, and it has Meryl Streep in it. So I would be interested if people watch it and see what they think. And Lughnasadh plays a little bit of a role, but it's not really the main thrust of the story.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's sort of a sinister role.
Yeah, because it's like, what have these people sown and what are they reaping?
Right.
Yeah.
And there's this contrast of this sort of ecstatic chaos versus this very buttoned down, very sort of repressed kind of upbringing and
Yeah.
living.
That's funny you should say that, because I've been thinking a lot about the death of Sinead O'Connor this week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how so many people criticized her in her life, and yet now everything's turned around in her death.
Yeah.
And I wish she had been shown that respect in her life.
Absolutely.
Especially, she was like, it turns out she was right to rip up the picture of the Pope on SNL.
Yeah.
Because she was ahead of the curve, and I think she did change Ireland a lot. She kind of gave permission to people to be rebellious against the church and things like that. So I think we owe her a great debt.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
She was such a liberating voice. I mean, I remember when The Lion and the Cobra first came out in the 80s, and it was so raw. It was so alive. And I'd never heard anything like it. She was really a one-off.
Mm-hmm. So that's what I've been thinking about this Lughnasadh anyway. Yeah. How far we've come.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. Well, listen, this has been a great conversation. Thank you all for coming and talking about the season. I know that our YouTube visitors really enjoy these roundtables, so I really appreciate your coming and doing them.
I do have one question for our viewers. I would love to hear more about what you are doing. If you could leave comments about what the kind of things you're doing this time of year, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would be great. But it's always great to be able to talk to our folks and communicate about what Atheopaganism is and what our approaches are to living this life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So thanks to all of you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.